Today, we're digging into a really surprising data-driven argument about one of the biggest moments in modern history. And it comes from the one person you'd least expect, the man celebrated for unifying a nation. So let's get right into it, because on the surface, this sounds like a huge contradiction, right? We're gonna unpack the really pragmatic case made by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who actually argued that for India to be truly strong, it first had to be split apart. At a time when most nationalist leaders were fighting tooth and nail for a single, united India, Dr. Ambedkar kind of took a step back. He looked at the whole situation, not with sentiment, but with cold, hard data. And that led him to a very, very different conclusion. Yeah, you can think of him here as a political realist. He was basically warning everyone that if they ignored these deep-seated problems with national security and finance, the new nation would be crippled before it even got a chance to stand up. So let's start with his first big concern. Okay, so Ambedkar's first problem was all about the numbers. It was a statistical issue, hiding in plain sight right inside the one institution that was supposed to protect the nation, the Indian Army. And as he saw it, it was a ticking time bomb. What he pointed out was this really stark imbalance. Look at this. While Muslims made up about a quarter of the population, the representation in the army was double that, and in some parts it was nearly triple. Now, for Ambedkar, this wasn't just some interesting statistic. And this quote gets to the very core of his concern. For him, this massive overrepresentation was a direct threat to the stability of a future democracy. He was asking a really tough question. If there was ever a crisis along communal lines, where would the army's loyalty actually be? But he didn't just stop at the religious breakdown. He dug even deeper, and he found out that this wasn't just about faith, it was about geography. The whole problem was intensely focused in one specific part of the country. And this chart just drives the point right home. An incredible 55% of the entire army was recruited from the Northwest, specifically Punjab and the NWFP. And here's the critical part, right? These were the exact provinces at the heart of the movement demanding a separate nation of Pakistan. He called this the gatekeeper risk, and the logic was pretty simple. How can a nation ever be truly secure when the people holding the keys to its defense are the very ones who might not be loyal to it? He saw this as giving one region a dangerous amount of power, a risk that was just way too big for a fragile new nation to take. Now, this security concern connects directly to his second huge problem. This one wasn't about soldiers, it was about money. He discovered that this whole security risk was being paid for in a way that he thought was, well, financially catastrophic. It's a simple question, but a really profound one. So Ambedkar followed the money. He dug into the British Raja's own financial records, and what he uncovered became the foundation for his powerful economic case for partition. His analysis showed that the financial engine of India was almost entirely in what he called the Hindustan provinces. We're talking something like 80% of all the central government's revenue came from Hindu-majority areas like Bombay and Madras. Meanwhile, the future Pakistan provinces, they contributed just a tiny fraction of that. And this is where the two problems just slam into each other. The single biggest national expense was the military. It was eating up over half of the entire central budget. So just think about that for a second. Who was actually in the army that all this money was paying for? So he laid out this logic, and he called it a suicidal arrangement. Basically, the Hindu-majority regions were making the money. That money was then spent on the army, and that army was filled with men from the very regions that wanted to break away. In his eyes, this was a massive, unsustainable transfer of wealth from one part of the country to a potentially hostile other part. Okay, so after laying out these two massive problems, a security threat and a financial drain, Ambedkar presented his solution. And to many, it was absolutely shocking. He said, accept partition. He framed the choice in these really stark terms. On one side, you could have a huge, united India that inherited a divided army and a permanent financial drain, which would lead to constant instability. Or you could have a partitioned India. Sure, it'd be smaller, but it could be stronger, more unified, and finally in control of its own destiny. So from his point of view, partition wasn't a tragedy. It was a strategic opportunity. It was a chance to build a truly national army, one recruited from all over the country, and finally get rid of that divisive British myth of martial races.
And crucially, it would free up enormous amounts of money to be invested in India's own development, to build schools, hospitals, and infrastructure, instead of subsidizing a potential threat.
So, with all this data in hand, his final message to the leaders of the independence movement was, well, it was direct. It was unsentimental. There was just no room for idealism. It was simply the blunt truth as he saw it. This one sentence just perfectly sums up his entire data-driven strategic argument. He was pretty much pleading with the leaders to stop focusing on the size of the map and start focusing on how to build a state that was viable, secure, and financially stable. And that's really the tough question his argument leaves us with today, isn't it? It forces us to look beyond the powerful emotions we all have about partition and instead consider the complex, often uncomfortable calculations that can hide beneath our most cherished national ideals.